With every new console generation comes a launch title that, for one reason or another, ends up imbued with the energy of memes. For the PlayStation 4, it was eventually Knack. For the PS3, nobody may remember Genji Days of the Blade, but Giant Enemy Crab will live forever. And for the PlayStation 5, we're talking about Bugsnax. This charming little indie game made by the team behind the equally ridiculous Octodad stole the hearts of many players online during the PS5's reveal event thanks to its quirky trailer and, of course, its catchy theme song. But what exactly is a Bug Snak, and what even is this game for that matter? I received an early copy of Bugsnax from the developer, and after my 8 or so hour playthrough, I can safely say that it's going to be one of the most interesting, unique, and oddly heartfelt games in the PS5's launch lineup, but that doesn't mean it's without its quirks and flaws. I think it might even be a cult classic in the making, but before I get ahead of myself, let's break down in today's spoiler-free review why you shouldn't sleep on Bugsnax. At its core, Bugsnax is a game that wears its inspirations right on its sleeve. You play as a journalist sent to investigate the remote Snack-Tooth Island, where an explorer named Elizabeth has discovered the mysterious Bugsnax, these edible little creatures that transform a person's limbs when eaten. However, by the time you arrive, Lizbert is missing, and the other settlers in the pop-up village of Snackburg have all split up and left the town after some huge argument. In order to figure out the mystery of Snack-Tooth Island and Lizbert's whereabouts, and in order to get your story, you've got to trek to the island's several regions and convince the residents to put aside their differences and come rebuild the town. Within your first half hour or so, you'll already see the game's web of inspirations start to come together. Since you're a journalist, you'll be taking pictures of every new snack that you see, often using the environment and your growing arsenal of gadgets to unlock new snacks. It feels kind of like the Pokemon Snap 2 that we'd always wanted, before Pokemon Snap 2 was announced like a week after this game was, but that's neither here nor there. But you won't just be photographing these creatures, you'll be using those same gadgets to solve environmental puzzles and capture the 100 different species of Bugsnax in an incredibly similar manner to Ape Escape. And all the while, you'll be working to complete dozens of quests for Snackburg's dozen residents, getting to know their distinct characters and relationships with their fellow villagers, earning their trust, and interviewing them for your eventual story. You could name a whole slew of games that fit this part of the bill, but Bugsnax is able to pull together these fairly disconnected inspirations to make what's close to a one-of-a-kind experience. The first couple hours are where what I'm gonna call the first bit of this magic really shows, throwing you into this wondrous world full of adorably creative creatures and putting a smile on your face as you catch and admire each new one that pops up. From the French fry spider to an apple crab to the sandipede, a centipede made up of a sliced sub sandwich, every single one of these snacks is an inventive hybrid of food and bug with an equally inventive name to match. So many times when I was playing, I would see a new snack and think to myself, okay, how did nobody think of this one before? And this happened again and again. And so many of these bugs have their own catch conditions. Some may walk right into your trap, while others may have to be coaxed over with different condiments that you can shoot with a slingshot. Others still may have to be hit or attacked by another creature before you can grab them, highlighting all of the different ways that these snacks in any biome can interact organically with one another. My favorite capture, though, is probably a good way to describe this game in one sentence or less. I covered my walking pet Strawberry's hamster ball in chocolate in order to coax a skittish, chocolate-loving kiwi out of hiding, then used a laser pointer to guide my Strawberry and thus the kiwi towards my trap. I love this game. With this all said, by the end of the game, I started to want to see a bit more done with these puzzles, because a good number of the later snacks are just slightly modified reskins of previous ones, and there are only so many effects like fire and ice added into the mix that are usually solved in the same few ways, often by guiding snacks into nearby water. Other times you might find yourself stuck for a couple minutes because maybe the snack you need doesn't show up during the daytime or when it's raining. Yes, this game has time and weather cycles. Or perhaps a catch condition or a snack's photograph hints are a bit obtuse and confusing you. Or even a nearby hostile snack might be messing up your game plan, but unclear directions are a recurring issue here, so I'll touch on that in a bit. Generally, the game paces itself well enough to mask those infrequent issues, with each new area taking about 20 to 40 minutes to go through if you're focusing mostly on the main quest, and there are hours upon hours of distractions in the form of the game's many side quests. With each new area comes another character or two that moved out of Snackburg, and that in turn means another character or two that you'll very quickly want to get to know. This is the second bit of that Bugsnax magic, its characterization. Every new person you meet will fit pretty well at first into a set trope: the gruff farmer, the washed-up pop star, the seedy salesman, the mean girl's gossip, and so on. You won't think too much of them right away, outside of maybe a funny line of dialogue.
Welcome to the party, Whambone!
We are not friends.
Since for at least the first couple hours, you'll be so tuned into the gameplay and the world. But right as the gameplay starts to settle in, right as you might start to wonder if the game's a bit too one-note to hold your attention for too long, the characters really start to come alive with their own fears, their own insecurities, and they go from archetypes to real people. That gruff farmer, late at night, he talks to a cactus because he's lonely, because he wants his wife to come back home after a fight, but he doesn't have the strength to go talk to her and express those feelings. The town gossip knows that her tendencies scared off any friends that she had in the past. That's why she came to Snacktooth, because she had no friends left, but she doesn't know how to break out of it. What might be side content starts to feel like necessary main content because you want to help these folks stop fighting with one another and with themselves. You really want to see Snackburg thrive, even if all you're doing is catching a specific snack and feeding it to people again and again and again and again. There are moments that really caught me off guard in Bugsnax in the best way possible. I don't think you ever really expect a meme game to start hitting home, but once it does, the writing becomes the driving factor as the gameplay becomes perhaps a little bit of a means to an end, albeit a very fun one. With each character you bring home to Snackburg, you start to get ever closer to unraveling the mystery at the heart of the game, which for many players will be what drives them to see it through to the end when things inch closer to tedious, which brings me back to that occasionally obtuse design. When Bugsnax is at its best, a snack's design tells you all that you need to know. The great mosquitoes need to eat something to fill up so that they fall to the ground and you can catch them. Other times, doing your scouting and taking pictures will provide you with an implicit or explicit hint. Maybe you should shoot a snack's favorite condiment at it to see how it reacts. But then there are times when you're told to catch a snack and they just leave it all for you to figure out. One example early on is the Bunger, a bouncy hamburger that will charge towards anything covered in ketchup. If you're at all like me, first you'll think that it just has to run into a wall and then it'll land on its back, but that's not it. Then you'll think that maybe it has to do with this one random tree stump that's just kind of sitting there in the level, but nope, that's not it either. Then you'll go back and talk to the farmer Wambus to see if he'll give you any hint, but he'll just say the same thing over and over again: go catch a Bunger. After a few minutes of trying just about everything imaginable, I figured out that you have to draw two bungers close enough to one another by leading them with ketchup to make them run into one another, which you wouldn't think would work since they're across the level from one another and across a couple small creeks, and you know that ketchup doesn't work in water. A simple hint option here or there would go a long way when a quest objective is super vague, or when you've already tried the correct solution and it just didn't happen to work the first time for some reason. It's not common enough that it's a game breaker or anything, but Bugsnax can be a bit unintuitive for a game with such a cutesy, family-friendly image. And on the topic of that image, I do have to talk about the worst part about Bugsnax. It's many performance issues. Now, I'm playing this game on PS4, that's the footage you've been watching for this video, so there's absolutely no reason that these problems should be present either on PC or on the PS5 version, but then again, there's also no reason that the PS4 version should have this many issues. I was shocked when I ran into frame stuttering in even the first moments of gameplay, and I'm still a bit shocked even now that the town of Snackburg can mess with performance as much as it does as the hub of the game. At nighttime, the lighting on some of the buildings in the town will pop in at a very close distance. If during a conversation another character happens to walk into the frame, you'll often see some hiccups, and the game takes on average 20 seconds to load when you move to a new area, sometimes even stretching well past 30 seconds. This really hurts the pace near the end of the story, as right when you're nearing the climax, you'll be forced to backtrack through 3+ areas in a row and wait, and wait, and wait. And I know I don't have to say it, but if you've been watching the screen during this video, you can tell that this isn't some performance-intensive game. It's 5 GB to download Bugsnax on PS4 and only 8 gigs on PS5. You can tell that Bugsnax started development in 2014 because it runs like a 2014 game. Now, there may be a day one patch that I don't know about for the PS4 version, and I have to think that these issues are all non-existent on the next-gen version of Bugsnax, hence why I saved these criticisms for last. I'm going to reserve judgment for now on this front, but I do have to say that even though they didn't ruin the game by any stretch, these performance issues really aren't acceptable on current-gen hardware, let alone next-gen hardware, and especially not for a game priced at $25 on current-gen and PC. Cheaper indie games with far less support from major console backers have looked and run far better and released years earlier. Beyond that though, I really don't have many issues with Bugsnax that are more than small nitpicks. It's a game I went into with very few expectations, and it's a game that I quickly fell in love with. Although I've kept it mostly vague for the sake of spoilers, trust me when I say that the writing for these dozen or so characters is so remarkably full of heart, so even if you might not be sold on the simple premise of the gameplay, I think Bugsnax deserves a shot. Honestly, it's a perfect launch game considering the PS5's relatively sparse launch lineup. You're probably going to be looking for a new game right around December or so, and Bugsnax is such a great casual time that you just can't go wrong. $25 is a great price point for this game if you're looking at buying it, but don't forget that PS5 owners can get the game for free via PS Plus so long as you redeem it by January 4th, 2021. And if you're not getting a PS5 right away, don't sweat, you can still reserve your free PS5 copy via the PS app, I think, or the website. You can reserve it somewhere, I'm not really sure where. And it'll be there for you whenever you do make the console jump then. So for most of you watching, it's free. You've got no excuse. Don't sleep on Bugsnax. If you're anything like me, you're going to be very pleasantly surprised. If you've made it to the end of the video, thank you very much for watching. If you didn't make it this far, I'm telling Mom. Whenever you get the chance to play Bugsnax, make sure to pop back in and let me know in the comments what you thought about it. I'm really excited to hear what other people have to say about this one. And of course, if you're new here and you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you stuck around and subscribed. We've got a very busy month ahead of us with the PS5's launch, and I'm hoping to cover a good number of the system's games very early on, so hopefully you'll be excited for that. And speaking of, I've got to get back to work on another video because it's 5 a.m. when I'm recording this, I haven't slept, and I don't get to sleep until I cover one more game before the PS5's launch, so I'm gonna call it now. Thanks again, and as always, until next time, stay golden. A huge thank you to each and every one of my Patreon supporters for their continued love and also money. These supporters include Goldstorm07, Matthew0606, Terminally Nerdy, Wolf Chaoson, and Buckles Chucklo. And it can include you if you also wish to give me your adulation and also money over at patreon.com/thegoldenbolt. If you don't, I'm telling Mom.